and welcome to our program Sky's the Limit, and I'm your host Sharmeen Ali. Today we have for you on our program Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi. He was the youngest advocate to be permitted to speak in the Pakistan Supreme Court at the age of 26, and now his work involves working tirelessly to release 8,000 Pakistani prisoners detained abroad in prisons, and also he fought in the Supreme Court for 8 million Pakistani citizens overseas to get the right to vote. So let's welcome Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi to our program now. Thank you so much for joining us on our program Sky's the Limit.
Yes.
You know why we call it Sky's the Limit? It's to show that people like you, the kind of work that you're doing, there's no limit to how much you can actually achieve and what an individual can do even on your own to make such a huge difference for people. And mashallah, say you're one of those Pakistanis who we're proud of because you're doing all this work for others. So like we say, not all heroes wear capes, and you're one of ours. So let's begin with your story.
Thank you very much.
So tell us, Dawood, you grew up where exactly? You grew up in Pakistan or the US? Just tell us.
Actually, first I really thank you, and secondly, it's really an honor to be on your show, because the way it's been covered around the globe, and it's in English, so a lot of English people would understand that what people of Pakistani are been contributing in around the globe.
It's very important to show that.
So yes, when I was 1 year old, I was born in Sialkot, Pakistan, but then I moved to America because my father was working in America at that time in New York, and then I lived there for 7 years. And when I was 7 years old, I moved back to Pakistan. And then I got admitted at school. And I still remember that I was really struggling to get into my Urdu, kind of stuff. And then I think so when I was 12, I moved back to England to do my schooling, because I was really struggling with my education. But I was really homesick at that time. Then after a year or something like that.
Was that in boarding or something like that?
Yes, that kind of school. My khala used to live, at the outskirts of London. So she actually found that school which was close to her house. So that's why I was being at, me and my sister, she was with me as well at that time. Yes.
Okay.
So then after a year, I just gave up, and then I went back to Pakistan again. And then at age 17 and a half something, then I went back to England again. And then I lived there for 9 years, something like that, for my college, and then I went to 2 different universities as well.
In England?
So that, yes. So that was my time.
So tell us about your family. What kind of a life did you have with them? You come from a business family, yet you didn't choose to sort of join the family business, and instead you took on this work in the legal profession.
Well, actually, my family migrated from Afghanistan, I mean, like in 1905. And my great-grandfather was in mysticism kind of stuff. He was very much like a spiritual guide, not only for the people, but for the political class over there. But then
in
he
Afghanistan.
was in Afghanistan.
How interesting.
Yes, and then he was self-exiled when Nader Shah government came in. And then at that time, he first came to Abbottabad, and he had a lot of Piri Muridi at that time as well. And then he moved to Fazirabad and then to Sialkot. But my grandfather and his kids afterwards, they never been into these kind of things. And then my grandfather was the only one and one of the youngest who went into business. And then first he was into clothing business, and then afterwards he switched to a lot of different businesses. But one of the things which he did was that he, in 1970 something like that, he got a hotel in Murray, because he always wanted to live around, hilly areas, the kind of, the tabiat he used to have.
Yeah, and the beautiful environment there. Yes. Who can blame him?
So my summers used to be in Murray, and my winters and school and everything was in, Sialkot. So this is how, and he was in hotel business, and then he went into jewelry as well, and then he went to make some, when the real estate business, boomed from the last 30 years, then he went into real estate as well. But he didn't, he got really old when people got too much money at that time, but he wasn't in the race, but he was comfortable.
Right. So, okay, you come from this business family, yet you're an idealist who's trying to make a change in the world.
Yeah.
So, what made you decide not to be sort of, chilled out in the family business and just, follow that and have a relaxed life, and instead go on to become this crusader for human rights? Tell us about that.
Yeah, my grandfather I was the most close with. I mean, even today I still, he died 2 years ago, but I still have his memories, in me, and that is the biggest influence in my life, with him. He actually wanted me to study law, but I never wanted to do law. So he actually, when I turned 17,
what was the reason for that? Why did he want you to study law?
I wanted to do acting. This is what I wanted to do. So he wanted me to study law, because he said that, oh, when you study law, your acting is going to improve as well.
That's
so
true.
this is how, these things. But when I went to England, in his mind, I was going to study law. But in my mind, I was going to study some degree so that at least I can satisfy him that I studied.
And then become an actor.
And then I should pursue my career in acting. But when I went to England and I got myself into certain things, kind of working for some plays, some studios and those kind of stuff. I liked it, actually. But when I finished my study, it was in business studies. So when I went back to Pakistan after 4.5 years, he asked me, what have you done? I said, I've done business degree. He said, you have wasted your time. I told you to study law, but you have studied business. Then he sent me back again. So I came back to England again. For the 3 years, I studied law.
Okay.
And that was the time when I was reshaping my mind as well, that what I want to be, what things I should do, and these kind of things, it was happening.
Okay, we're talking about shaping your mind now. What were your experiences from your childhood growing up and from maybe your education that shaped your thinking right now? Were there any people who had a profound impact on the way you think and what you want to do in the future?
Yes. What I remember, I was very asthmatic when I was like 3 or 4 years old. And if you have been to New York, there are trains which go from Queens to Brooklyn. And over there used to be a very huge skyscraper kind of building. And over there, it used to write that perfection is not an accident. My father used to always show me that thing, that, you have to, read this phrase.
On the New York City subway?
Yes.
Okay. That's
and
cool.
then, and then afterwards, when I was growing up, my grandfather put me a lot into wildlife kind of things. We used to watch a lot of wildlife videos, and he used to symbolize as how you have to act like a lion, how you have to resist. So we used to symbolize ourselves with animals a lot. That's why we used to love in Murray. And this is, I think, so he shaped me up in a way to resist. He shaped me up in a way to fight. So I don't give up. I don't really easily, draw back myself with situations. So I stood up. I think so my grandfather was the greatest influence for me, yes.
So your grandfather, because you keep mentioning him, a lot of time people talk about parents or teachers. In your case,
no, my parents were very easygoing, because I thought that they have comfortable living. They found that, okay, whatever you do, life is going to be comfortable. But my grandfather wanted some more from me, which he expected. So yes, so he was the greatest influence on me. But when I went to the law school, then obviously a lot of things changed. I moved across England a lot, and then I met a lot of activists in England. I mean, there was one person, Tony Benn, if you know him. He was the longest serving MP in England. He was a Labour's Party MP in 1970s, and he was a Labour minister. He used to come to Hyde Park a lot, and this is where I used to meet up him a lot. He had a huge impact in my life, the way he used to tell about the rights of people who are, even in UK, even today, people are suffering from certain, government qualities and abilities what they have. They don't get the, that kind of space in the society. So I was pretty much prepared in a way to understand what kind of society I'm jumping into Pakistan. But it was pretty much surprised when you really start working into the system.
Absolutely, because the legal system here is very complicated. So this was right now in England. You were in Uxbridge College, and then you went to Oxford Brookes University to study your law degree.
No, I did in Oxford. I did my business degree, and then I went to University of Law. They used to specialize only in law, and because I wanted myself to be completely focused into law, so it was in the suburb of Surrey, the place called Guildford, and it was like a very quiet town. So it had my time. I had my time over there to focus, and because you had to finish your LLB in 2 years, so that was tough. So
Yeah.
we have to be very much focused over there. So that's why I was
Okay,
in
that
the
was
University of
skillful.
Law. Yeah.
Right. Okay, and then your work with British politics, you were just mentioning part of that. Tell us a little bit.
When I was living in Oxford town, I came across a lot of friends who are still not really in touch with me now, but there were a lot of friends who were linked up with the politics, and most of them went into bureaucracy. So at one time, I wanted to be in bureaucracy in England because I have a lot of friends, but then my grandfather was keep pushing me back, and this is how things really changed. But when I went to the law school, this was the time when I started going Westminster a lot, and then I used to roam around different barristers and lawyers, and even at that time, all these retired, you see MPs, they used to come along to the Hyde Park walking around, and we used to go to them and used to ask them a lot of questions and all those stuff. So Sherry Blair, she was one of my school alumni, you know, in the college, and then sometime we came across her as well. So yes, I had a huge impact about these people.
You had this interaction going on with all these lawyers in the parliament.
Yes, it was, and that was really, really hard for me in Pakistan. When you came along in Pakistan, you go to the kachari, and the kind of culture you see in the kachari, and it's very complex. It's change of the world. But the way you settle, the way you understand why you are here. If you don't have a purpose in Pakistan, for a person like me, it's hard. Because people of mindsets and people of ideas, it was hard. But I had a purpose, yeah.
You have to have a passion
to
do something
like
this.
You have to have a passion.
Yeah, otherwise you'll give up. Because
Yes.
if it's for monetary reasons or any other reason,
Yes.
you want overnight success, in this profession it's not going to happen, like in many professions, like in most arenas, anywhere in the world. So you had a passion for law, and you came back to Pakistan, and you started doing what? Tell us.
When I came back to Pakistan, one thing was happening in Pakistan was the judicial activism. I mean, like if the Chaudhry was reinstated, and the way the Supreme Court was active at that time.
That was a landmark moment.
Yes, there was and then at that time I was being swallowed into it, actually. I wanted myself to go to the lower kachari and start learning the stuff, but there were some people who actually pushed me that you should try your luck in the Supreme Court right now for the fundamental rights cases. Because if the Chaudhry at that time was allowing any sort of issue to be taken up in the Supreme Court, or even you are a junior lawyer, or even you are just a simple, you know, person on the road, if you have an issue and you have done a petition, maybe he's going to take up your case. But in lawyers, I found that the youngsters who came in the law society, they were very timid at that time to go for that higher scale of, because for people it was not a profession. For me, it was the start of profession. So for me, I had a choice: either I go to the lower court or either I go to the higher court. If I go to the higher court and if I lose, then I'm gonna, you know, fall down from the top. But if I lose from the lower kachari, then I'm going to sustain because I'm learning. So it was the highest risk for me. But I did took it.
So you went to the Supreme Court. You were the youngest ever
I
lawyer in
think so.
Pakistan to be allowed to speak in the Supreme Court at 26?
Yes. What happened, there was one case in Supreme Court in 2012. It was about the Contempt of Court Ordinance. The government passed the Contempt of Court Ordinance, and the thing was that they have said that all the public holders, if they don't listen to the court orders, they're not going to get contempt. So this was against the independence of judiciary, the respect of the judges, and at the same time, the administration of justice. So I took up that petition, I went to the Supreme Court, and there were other 26 petitioners as well in that case. So I got the chance to speak. It was 5 judges bench. I mean, I've never thought about that I can ever appear. So that was the first time ever in my life that I appeared before the judges
of the Supreme Court. What was
the
the outcome
Court.
of that case?
The case went into the favor of the petitioners, in our favor, which gave me a lot of confidence.
There you go.
Yes.
So you have to try.
Yes.
You have to take that risk.
You have to try.
Yeah.
Then afterwards, I took up a lot of different cases, and then it just got into it. I just got into it.
And what about, like, you also ran in the elections with the PTI?
Yes, what actually happened was...
Which election was this? Just tell us.
What actually happened was, I was doing one case in Islamabad High Court. It was about the appointment of the heads of SECP and CCP. Somebody rang me and he said that the selection of these people is not on merit, because there is a certain commission which have to scrutinize those people. I never knew at that time for the CCP CCP and SCCP, what a big, huge organizations these are monetary organization which is working in Pakistan. So I went to the High Court and I got
the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Competition Commission. Right.
So I got the stay order against those appointments. It was the government of PPP in 2012. So that case came really highlighted in the Dawn newspaper and everything like that. And because of that case, I got friends with Asad Umar in the PTI. And we got really good friendship. We developed a good friendship. And then when 2013 election came, I was not really active in politics at that time because I was really new in Pakistan. But
2013?
Yes.
Okay.
Then what happened then when we had a by-election in 2013, then I was being, I had a talk with Asad, and I mean, he said, if you want to take a chance, then you can try.
So you got a ticket with PTI?
Yes, I got a ticket with PTI.
And you contested against giants?
Yes. Yeah, actually, the guy I was contesting against, I had a case against his appointment as well in the Lahore High Court. So I had my case against him, and at the same time, I had my election against him as well. So it was a really, really good challenge for me. But unfortunately, well, I can say fortunately, I went into the elections. Obviously, you have your jealousies around. You have all those people who just simply say that, how the hell he's 28 and he's getting the ticket, and we are just running around from the last 30 years and we didn't have the ticket.
Absolutely.
So you don't get the support.
So a lot of people
actually
vying for those tickets
yes.
for PTI that
So
time.
I didn't have that support, but the way I worked and the way I actually got into it, I think so that was the greatest experience for me, which actually helped me to meet around people in the future. But at that time, when I lost the election, I met Imran Khan, Prime Minister, and he asked me, how did the election goes? I said, Khan Sahab, I did try my best. And he said, okay, don't worry, it was a training. It was your training. So such things, people don't in Pakistan as a political party's head, they don't really say these things that it was a training, because for them the ticket was a huge thing.
It is, yeah.
So I think so that was my greatest experience in politics.
Yeah, well, that says a lot about the Prime Minister as a leader.
Yes.
So he's giving chances to young people like you to get experience
he gave me a chance, yes.
in elections.
Yeah. Yes, he
and
gave me
it
that
very
chance.
crucial. That was a critical election,
Yes.
actually. So then after that, your work entailed working for overseas Pakistanis to get the right to vote. There's millions of overseas Pakistanis. In that election in 2013, from what I recall, a lot of our overseas Pakistani friends were complaining that we're huge supporters of PTI, but we can't vote for them, and we could be with the NICOP, there's no mechanism by which we can vote. So you worked on that, and you actually had a huge success.
Actually, what happened when I lost the election, in my mind, I thought that my city hasn't accepted me yet. So I have to go back to those people who I have spent too much time with, and these were overseas Pakistani. So basically, one of my friends, she lives in Connecticut in America. Her name is Farhat. So Farhat rang me up and she said, Dawood, why don't you work for overseas right to vote, because now you have a time and you don't want to engage so much into politics, so why don't you work for the overseas right to vote? I asked her, I said, I don't know what is going on about this thing. So when I found out, and then I found that in overseas Pakistani right to vote, there was the right which was being given by the Iftihar Chaudhry court, but it was never been implemented.
Wow.
Every court was giving the orders, but the implementation wasn't there. So in 2011, I think so that that judgment came up in Nasir Iqbal's case, something like that. The guy Nasir Iqbal was somewhere in the West, and he applied for that in the Supreme Court, and Iftihar Chaudhry did that. But because the time was very, very short before the 2013 election, it never happened.
Yeah.
But what happened, that after the election, the government of PMLN came in and they were not interested to do this thing. Or either they found there is no mechanism that how a person sitting abroad can vote in Pakistan. So I took up this judgment of Supreme Court and I went to Islamabad High Court. So now this Chief Justice Attar Minallah, he was one of the judges at that time. He gave direction on the petition that I should go and see the Election Commission of Pakistan and they will hear my petition. So then I went to Election Commission of Pakistan. Then there was Justice Sardar Raza Khan. He's retired now. He was the Chief Election Commission of Pakistan at that time. He, along with 4 other judges, they ordered in my favor that the government should find a way to, for Pakistani to vote in the elections, living abroad. So then I actually, no one was doing anything. I mean, even after that order. Then in 2015, in the start, Imran Khan took up this order and he went to the Election Commission. And when he went into the Election Commission, then he asked for overseas Pakistani right to vote, but nothing happened. Then I took up this case to the Supreme Court in 2015. And in 2015, what I did, which has never happened in Pakistan ever, that I took like 62 Pakistanis, overseas Pakistani petitioners in the Supreme Court.
Wow.
So this judgment is still on the name of Farad Siddiqui, who was the first person who worked with me, and along with 62 other petitioners in that case. So then we went into the Supreme Court, and these 3 years were so tough for me because Supreme Court were not really taking, taking up the case, and I was really, really anxious, and I was working for it because, in Pakistan, cases come in line with the time, the way they've been filed. But then in 2018, the opportunity came up, and it was my luck that Justice Saqib Nisar got interested into the matter, and he took up the case. But the interesting thing, what happened was that when I spoke to one of my friends in 2014, and I told him that you should tell Imran Khan that he should do something for the overseas Pakistani, and he should be party in my case in the Supreme Court. And he said, I have talked to him, and he have said that I don't think PMLN should do anything, or are they going to do something? But when the case took up, then Imran Khan and Arif Alvi became party in my case.
Right.
So they become party of my case. So we together, then Anwar Mansoor Khan was their attorney, who became the Attorney General afterwards. So then, that case went along really great. And then Saqib
Because
Nisar.
PTI had a huge overseas following, and a lot of fundraising and all happened by overseas Pakistanis, and naturally they want to also exercise their right to vote, and that is a constitutionally given right to them.
Yes.
So now, how did this judgment impact your the implementation of this actual right that they can vote? What's the mechanism now that's in place?
What happened was that in the court, when this issue came up, that how they're going to vote, because 8 million is a huge number, and how they're going to vote. So there was an e-voting mechanism that you're going to vote electronically. But then they hired a company who volunteered itself. It is based in Dubai, but they were from Australia. That company made like a mechanism, an electronic mechanism that you're going to have like an electronic ballot. So basically on your ID card, you have 2 addresses. One address is the address where you're temporarily living abroad, and one is your permanent address in Pakistan. So what is going to be your address is going to be your constituency. So when the election is going to come in, then you're going to register yourself.
Your permanent address is the constituency where you
where are you residing in Pakistan. So that is your constituency. So what actually happened when the election comes in, you have to register yourself first online that I want to vote. But then they're going to issue you electronic ballot. So that electronic ballot, when you click it on the computer on a certain time before the election, then that ballot goes straight to the returning officer of that constituency. It's a very great system.
Very sophisticated.
Yes, but unfortunately, after this Russian meddling of all those elections in 2016 in America, it was a huge cautious step in Pakistan that how this electronic system can be hijacked. It have a huge issues. So that's why in the general election, they didn't apply that software, because this was the first ever system in the history of the world which is going to work for this huge number of people for the elections.
Purely electronically.
So what they did, they didn't, Saqib Nisar didn't allow for the general election, but then when the by-election came in, the system was being tested as a pilot test. Yes, it has been tested.
It's been tested.
But now what the government need to do is that they have to pass a law to make it as a permanent mechanism, because before it was not. Supreme Court doesn't make laws for those things. The Parliament have to implement the laws. So Supreme Court judgment need to be implemented sooner. I think so. They are working on it. So maybe they come with some solution.
Because that's a huge number of votes.
It is a huge number of votes.
Huge proportion.
And I tell you one interesting thing what actually happened. One of our friend, he's Arif Anis. He was working with me on this issue because I had a petitioner from England as well. So on the day of the final judgment, he requested me that he wants to come to Pakistan, and I said, yeah, you can come, and you can come with me to the Supreme Court. Even he was not a petitioner, he requested me that he wants to speak to Chief Justice and say thank you to him. So he came to the podium and he said that, thank you very much, and we are really looking forward to see you for the dam funds. So from there, this all dam fund thing started.
Oh,
so the Chief Justice started going for the dam funds and all those stuff. So this case opened up a lot of horizons, not for Pakistan, even for myself as well. So this is how this overseas voting thing actually happened.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you've also written a book about the role of overseas Pakistanis in the 21st century. Elaborate a little bit about that. How significant do you think this role is of overseas Pakistanis? We know a lot of them mobilize and do a lot of social welfare work in Pakistan. You know, they're active in a lot of different arenas. And also politically as well. A lot of them get involved. You have, you know, supporters of various political parties abroad and all, who are helping their campaigns. There's so many different roles that they play. And internationally advocating for Pakistan as well is very important. So your book is all about this. So describe to us what you think is the importance of overseas Pakistanis.
Well, I wrote this book not just because at that time I was having a huge ideas about this thing, but because I was being completely ignored about overseas voting case. So book was my avenue to open the avenues for people to understand that why do I mean to have the connection as a political connection with the overseas Pakistanis. Because now I believe that even you take American election recently, I mean, think about Kamala Harris. She came into power, and everybody, even in Pakistan or around the globe, they've been saying that India has entered in the White House because the kind of connection and the kind of supporters she had even in India.
Yes.
So in my mind, the biggest avenue to connect overseas Pakistanis with Pakistan is to be connecting them by political means, not only through charities, because the kids who are being grown up in the Western world now, they are not interested in Pakistan. They have very bad and worst experiences in Pakistan, unless they have
they have very little exposure to Pakistan as well.
And unless they have a very strong families in Pakistan and they come here and the system really supports them and they don't find any problems with it. But most of the Pakistanis who are living in the Middle East, these are the people who, because of the bad policies in the country, had to go out of the country to work. So these are the main affected people who must have the right to choose who's going to lead in their country. Because whoever is going to come and they're going to change the policies, it's going to be better for them not to migrate from Pakistan. So that was the biggest reason for me to feel that why these people go in these Arab world and the way they treat them and the way they imprison them afterwards and the way they've been lynching in the prisons, it was really sad for me. So that's why I found that for Pakistanis to protect their rights, it was really, really important to have a political connection with those people. They must have a say in Pakistan. And for the Western world, who are comfortable living over there, who have their rights, for me to catch their brains and to catch those people was the best thing that make them interested in the Pakistan politics as well. Because in America, the biggest thing the other nations are doing is lobbying. Lobbying for their nations. How can you lobby for someone when you're not connected with someone? I mean, the problem, and the problem right now in America, whatever people who are connecting with Pakistan to lobby for Pakistan, they're very individualistic people. They're just thinking their own, benefit in all of those stuff, rather than just making a huge compound of people who can work for Pakistan
because
in the
America,
American politics.
The Indian lobby is huge, and we always see that there's a problem with that because the Pakistani lobby is relatively weak. There have been years where we didn't have a foreign minister to actually mobilize the community over there. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Now, you said something about how you wanted to empower the overseas Pakistanis in the Middle East to get involved politically. How can they do that? Because the system is not exactly inclusive. So how can they actually have a voice in politics over here?
The only thing I have said recently, and I really, really believe, and I really, really appreciate, even a person is a dual national. It doesn't matter for me if he wants to serve his country. Because as a person, you have to have knowledge not only for being as a Pakistani. I mean, who is going to decide that who is most loyal to Pakistan? What is the parameter for that? I mean, if you are abiding by the law, which is happening in the West, then you will be considered loyal. I mean, for a person to be disloyal under high treason, that's a different sort of definition and life to be into. But you have to engage people. I mean, like for the Middle Eastern Pakistani, I would really believe the biggest thing is that to protect their rights, the biggest thing I see is the right to vote. Because the reason is that they must connect with Pakistan and they must have to have their say in the Pakistani government, because this is where every government comes in to protect their rights.
Yes.
I mean, why they are in the Middle East? Because solely because they are the poorest class of the Pakistani people who migrated abroad. So I think so for them to have their say in the Pakistani politics, it does matter and it makes sense.
Okay, so now working on, moving on to your other work, you're doing a lot of work on cases in Pakistan. You're doing work in the courts now on land reform. Now this is a very contentious issue in Pakistan, because we know that, you know, there are political powers, etc., which kind of resist this kind of change. We saw it take place in India many decades ago, land reforms, and that totally changed the political landscape in India. So tell us a bit about that work of yours, about land reforms, and why you think they're so important. Why are you working on this?
Well, land reform case, it's called, the case was been decided in 1991, and it was called Qazalbash case in the Supreme Court. At that time, it was there is a long history about this case, and Iftikhar Chaudhry in 2011, something like that, or in 10, he took up that judgment. He actually, Abid Hassan Manto was the person who is one of the most senior lawyers in Pakistan, in Lahore. He is a very strong, you know, and staunch believer of anti-feudalism and these kind of stuff. He took up this petition and he went to the Supreme Court and he said that people who are working under the feudals, they have no say in the elections, so that's why that infringed their fundamental right to vote. That was the first thing to put the case in the Supreme Court.
Right.
But there were some procedural errors in the judgment which he thinks has not been uncovered yet. So then he went to the Supreme Court for that judgment. But then there was in the newspaper that anyone who believed that land reform should be done and anyone who believed that this has not been done fairly, so these people can join in. So this is how most of the feudals, they join in against the land reform, and most of the people who believe the land reform should be done, they join the petitioner. So this is how in the Supreme Court there were like a lot of different organizations and a lot of individuals like me who joined that petition. So this is how I went into that matter. So it was like, there was like 11 judges bench, which is, you know, hearing the petition right now. But since 2014, it hasn't been taken up again.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we're kind of still in a limbo.
You're
with that.
still in the limbo. Because the whole status of the Punjab is going to change. Even the Balochistan.
Yeah.
I mean, like if we go back to the Constitution, where the Constitution says that the government have the right to restrict your tilling, I mean to restrict your land, so you can see that the government can do. It's a huge sensitive topic in Pakistan, which most of the people who are in the parliament would never like to be taken seriously.
Okay, and this is something that has to go through Parliament then?
Yes.
So that is where it
I mean, Supreme Court can, because at the time of General Ayub, he actually passed laws to restrict the lands, and then afterward Bhutto actually did as well. So these are the people who have done it. But when it came to General Zia's time, then it stopped.
And if this case ever was to go through, and what kind of impact do you think potentially it would have?
I mean, one person can only take 300 acres of land, not more than that. But at the same time, then I think, what about people who have industries? I mean, are you going to take back industry from them as well? I mean, why would you want to restrict somebody just for the land? What about the industry? I think so. It is not. It needs a lot of academic work. You have to analyze. I mean, it's not just you just go after the ideas for this thing. You have to have a very, very strong plan that what is going to be the ramifications afterwards. I mean, like you take back the land, because there's there's a lot of research which actually says that giving the land in a small number to people who have no experience about how to grow the land, it's going to damage more the agrarian land rather than doing the benefits. Because most of the big landowners, they have very high sophisticated machines which they are doing and growing stuff. So maybe that could stop. So there is both ends, you know.
There are pros and cons.
Yes, there's a huge pros and cons. That's why I think so. I was very passionate in 2014 about this. I like the idea, but when you come to the solution, I think so it gets complicated. It gets complicated. You don't have to be unfair for someone who earns money. Earning money is not a sin. So, you know, so you have to see the both ends.
Right, okay. And you've also done a lot of work on another very important topic I feel that we need to elaborate on is freedom of information. Why is that so important in this day and age?
Well, I really believe every society runs under the transparency and accountability. So how could be a system transparent when you're not telling what you're doing, when you're not telling what policies you have, when you are not telling what decisions you are making for the country? So for me, for system to be transparent, you have to have the freedom of information. I mean, if I want to analyze what is getting short in the society or what is, I mean, take about one food product. If that food product, I don't even know how much the government is growing, how would I know in the future that this product would be in the market or not? So I need to know. If there is one department of any government, even the highway department, and they got the public exchequer money to make a road, and I just got the information that the money which was being required, they have taken double the amount. So how would I know that this is transparent? I need to know the documents. I need to see the documents. So you actually control corruption in Pakistan by having the freedom of information. Unfortunately, in countries like, I mean, Pakistan is way much better now, but in countries like, you know, Nigeria and all those other countries, you cannot imagine that they can't even give you a single piece of paper that what the government is running. But I think so it is a huge revolutionary step which the Parliament take in 2017 to pass this Access to Information Act, which give the access of 43 different type of information on the websites of the ministries. But unfortunately, what research I have done and the reason why I have gone to the Supreme Court, only 13 or 14 types of information are still on the website. Majority of them are still missing. What is going to be the perks and the privileges of the government officials? What is going to be, what is the budget of the ministry? What is the audit reports of the ministries? Many other, you know, you have a lot of commission reports. You have a lot of other information which is very much beneficial to counter and cure the corruption. So a lot of information are still not public, which they have to be public since 2017. The government has been saying, yes, we are working, but I think so it's not really strongly, you know, I mean, like...
Right. And also in elections, for example, we now know that all the everybody who's contesting has to give their tax returns and they have to give all their sources of income and things like that. That's a lot of accountability right there. Does the public have access to that? To know, okay, this person who I'm voting for, where do their earnings come from? Are they honest, etc.?
Well, you challenge the candidacy of a candidate when they file their, you know, the asset and beyond whatever you know documents they are. I think so. Then yes, you can. You can apply for the returning officer for that file. You get it.
You can get it. Okay, that's important.
Yeah, this is
people
really
need to know
important.
who they're voting for and what
is their
about.
assets. Yes. Yeah, they can.
Okay, and you're talking about all the other, like the salaries and perks of government officials, etc., and different government departments, budgets, and all of that. What other issues do you think it's very important for the public to know what's happening at a government level?
Currently, if you see, what is the biggest issue in the NAB? Asset beyond means. How would I know how much you earn? How, if I see your lifestyle, I would like to know how much you earn because it's public money. I need to know. I mean, how are you earning more than your, you know, living? So you have to know, you know, what are you doing. So that's why I believe to stop all these like asset beyond means and to counter all these corruption, a person must know how much he's getting paid. So this is where we can analyze that this person is up to that task. So I think so it's very important.
And how about different government departments, and what projects and programs have they actually completed, with what amount of funds that they're getting, you know, through
Exactly.
the tax system?
And
the international donors and all, where is all that flow of
the main
capital
focus
going?
is one simple thing, and this is what the exchequer, public exchequer money. If you would see in America, when American went on and giving money by the Kerry Lugar bill, they never, you know, trusted in the first phase. They said that we're going to work through the US aid, something like that. So everybody is getting more transparent. And I really, really believe in Pakistan, when you have this law, you have to implement the law with a full spirit. And Prime Minister has always said about the Freedom of Information Act, and he really believes on that. And I really, really want to give him this message from this program, that he have to implement all the information which needs to be public.
Absolutely, because then half his work is done.
Yes,
when the public
Section 5,
holds their own officials accountable, half of his work is done, half of NAB's work is done, and the people themselves can actually choose and you know, speak up about.
I mean, like, think about,
important.
there are people in the foreign world who wants to invest in Pakistan. They want certain policies. They want certain information, and if the information is not available, they do lose some time interest, because they have to run around a lot in Pakistan. The biggest issue in Pakistan is that you don't get the information. So this is a huge issue. And I think so this 43 different kind of information, even you go on 30 or 35, it's fine, but you have to put them on public, because people want to see what the government is doing. This is called accountability.
Right. So freedom of information, that's a huge issue. Now, one of your main bodies of work is trying to have prisoners released abroad. 8,000 Pakistanis who are detained in foreign prisons. Those people and the conditions they're in and what the different reasons are and all, you're aware of them because you've worked with them. Let's talk about that, because that is a very sensitive issue, and this is your human rights work, which is, I mean, they're in foreign countries, and they really are pretty much kind of lost over there, right?
I mean, when I was doing this overseas boarding work, majority of people in the Middle East, whenever they used to call me, they always used to ask me about their, you know, loved ones is being imprisoned and lynching in the prison. And most of them were, all those people, most of them are into petty offenses. I mean, like the kafil and the way the kafil punish you over there, it's really, really extreme. I mean, like, maybe you haven't got that experience, but what kind of stories I've heard about, these are mostly working class people in the Arab world. And even today now, there are over 11,000 prisoners lynching in the Arab prisons around the globe, but majority, 60% of them are in the Arab, you know,
and they probably don't really have adequate legal representation there,
well,
because they're not well off. They're from very weak backgrounds.
This is the issue which is going on with the foreign ministry. Through one of my case was in the Supreme Court, and then afterwards there is one case by JPP in Lahore. They're talking about, it's about the government have to have a policy that how they're going to deal with these prisoners, how they're going to find the representation for them. I mean, for some prisoners, you don't even have to file a suit. For some prisoners, you just have to speak to the authorities, or either to send them back to Pakistan or something like that. But most of the people are really, really lynching in a very, very severe situation. And the reason why I feel for them is that because these are the working class people who send money home in Pakistan. So they are people of concern and issue.
Right.
And I whatever I have seen the files and whatever the people I have met across, they're very, you know, very small petty offenses. Some of those
so
people.
they're Pakistani prisoners from Sri Lanka, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, and you're trying to have them freed. Okay, you said they're petty offenses. Some of them were released. Tell us their stories a little bit about what some of them are going through. You were mentioning one earlier on.
Yes, there is a guy, Muhammad Ikhlaq Islam. He is a dialysis patient, and he is in Bangkok, a hospital and prison, something like that. This was the guy who actually connected me in Pakistan in 2017. And I went to Supreme Court with a petition to speak about the prisoners detained in Thailand prison. but then the Chief Justice Saqib Nisar took a suo motu about the issue as well. Some of the Thailand prisoners have came back, like 12 or 15, you know, since the order of the Chief
So
Justice 3
they
years
are
ago.
getting released and coming back?
Yeah, 10 or 12 of them, you know, in one batch. But the second batch where he has to come, he hasn't come yet. But the guy due to which I rose up this case, you know, to the Supreme Court, he is still in the hospital.
Pakistani Supreme Court decides on people in foreign countries to be brought back? How does that work?
I mean, like you have with some countries, you have a bilateral agreement that the people who are being imprisoned in Thailand, they can have their remaining imprisonment in Pakistan.
All right, okay.
So this, on these kind of terms, you know, they can come back. We have a lot of these agreements with different countries.
Okay, and one
Yes.
of your largest bodies of work is on the Dr. Afia Siddiqui case, which you're very passionate about also on a humanitarian basis. So let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah, Afia is one of my biggest corner of attention right now, and the reason for that is I see that case in a much different way, the way the case has been politicized and the way it has been, you know, has created a split in the Pakistani or even in the Muslim world about this case. People are still confused about that what actually has really happened. But when I took up her case with her family in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, at that time we actually was asking the government of Pakistan to find out ways to repatriate her, and the reason for that was that she is a mentally ill patient.
Really?
Yes, and she is in a Carswell Medical Center where they keep mentally ill prisoners. And the second thing is that, which is the most alarming thing, this mental illness, when I read her report from her court case files, it came to know that this mental illness was even before she was disappeared. And even in the court, if you read the case, and then I wrote the book about it as well, Afia Unheard, the book I wrote, I explained very much in detail how in the court she couldn't be, you know, easily assisted by her lawyer just because of her mental illness. So for me, it's a case of mental illness. It's a case of humanitarian grounds case. And for that, I met her lawyer in America who contested her matter in the trial in 2008 in America in Southern District Court. Then I asked him, I told him, I said, is there any legal way to repatriate Afia from the American prison where she is in mental care? If she can stay in that prison, why can't she stay in Pakistan under the seclusion of, you know, high security?
Okay.
So then he asked me, he said that there is one avenue which is called compassionate ground release. You can release a prisoner by the court which has actually sentenced her based on her mental illness grounds. So I invited him to Pakistan, and then in January 2020 he came to Pakistan on my request. Then we met Attorney General Anwar Mansoor Khan at that time, and we discussed with him the mechanism through which we can repatriate Afia through judicial means, through which you don't have to speak to American president, you have to follow the law, and this is how she can be easily released. So at that time, Anwar Mansoor actually advised me to write letter to Prime Minister and explain him that what you're trying to do and how you and Charles Swift and the guy who was a lawyer wants to volunteer for this thing to assist the government for this matter.
So the government here will have to initiate this process?
Yes,
okay.
the government have to. The reason is that Afia cannot do anything on her own. The
and
biggest
her lawyer
reason,
there cannot do it?
Yes, the reason is that she is mentally ill patient. She doesn't have the ability to decide the best for herself, because if you see in her cases and matters in the past, this is what you find. So the government of Pakistan through Vienna Convention need to get her guardianship. So this is how the Pakistani government can lead her case in the courts as the government of Pakistan citizen.
So it's a government to government kind of a process?
The government of Pakistan and the courts of America. This is how it's going to work. Then the Pakistani security agencies have to give the guarantee that when she will come to Pakistan, she will be under protection and she will be given the proper, this mental health sort of treatment, this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So this is the engagement of the government of Pakistan to repatriate that kind of a citizen.
Right.
So I wrote the letter to the Prime Minister in February 2020, and I offered him that mechanism and at the same time to help the government of Pakistan to get it done. But what I believe is that the reason why I wrote this book and the reason why I propagate this issue is two. One thing is that Pakistan has been demeaned around the globe on the name of Lady Al-Qaeda, through which they haven't charged her with any terrorism charges. It is just called a suspected terrorist having links with Al-Qaeda, but nothing has been proven. So Pakistan has been demeaned around the globe because of this Al-Qaeda, Lady Al-Qaeda. So I, being as a Pakistani, when I go in the West, I should not be called in this way because something has not been proven yet. So we have to get back that citizen in the first phase. And the second phase, I believe, is that we as a Pakistani have to show to our Pakistanis abroad that we are there to protect their fundamental rights. Because she is not a prisoner living in Guantanamo Bay. She is a prisoner in the federal prison. And the way she has been treated, and the way she is mentally ill, she has the right of humanitarian reasons. So this is my two things which I really, really strongly believe must be happening for the rights of the people.
So now what do we expect going forward, and what message do you have to conclude the program, because we've come to the end of our show? What do we expect from Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi in the next few years, decade, and what message do you want to give to the Pakistanis, to the youth of Pakistan, about how they can help their countrymen out when they're in a position to do so?
Well, it's a very, like when I succeeded in overseas right to vote case, I had a lot of offers from different multinational companies to have legal, a legal workshop with them. Even I didn't have any experience about the corporate world, but I did get the offer from those people.
Sort of to be an in-house lawyer for them.
Yes, for them. But I actually rejected those offers because I believe that right now in Pakistan, we are in the process of nation building. Everybody have to contribute. So this is how I believe, that Pakistan is in the progress of building up. Whatever nation, being as a lawyer society, has been grown up in the past, they have to devote most of their intelligence and work for the nation building, regardless of, saying that, oh, I didn't get that, credit of those things. Regardless of those things, you have to work for the bigger reasons.
Absolutely.
So this is my message.
That's a great message.
Thank
you so much, Barrister Dawood Ghaznavi, for joining us on our program today. Very interesting, very enlightening about all these different cases that you're working on, and best of luck for your future in all of this that you're trying to achieve. That brings us to the end of our program today. We'll see you next week at the same time, same program, Sky's the Limit, on Sunday, same day, every week. What we saw in this program today, again, is one of those Pakistanis who we see without much benefit to themselves is trying to fight for the plight of those downtrodden people who are, for example, prisoners abroad, who are languishing abroad, trying to bring them back home, and different services like that to the people of Pakistan, and for just generally for humanity, and then trying to improve the systems in Pakistan. It's a huge undertaking, so we must encourage the work of people like that and try and emulate it ourselves as well, because as we've seen on our program many times, these often are thankless jobs, and they're not very rewarding in many ways, personally even, but people do it for the sake of service to their country. So we must applaud that always. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.